The GPS tracker blinked green in my trembling hand. Someone had been watching me for months. But I never imagined the person tracking my every move was the man my daughter was planning to marry in 3 weeks. Before we dive into this story, smash that like button, comment your location below so we know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our daily true crime, betrayal, revenge and many more stories plus relationship tips we share daily. My name is Margaret Davies. I'm 64 years old, a widow of 9 years, and I've learned that the most dangerous threats are the ones that arrive wearing familiar faces. That Tuesday morning started like any other. The October sky hung pale and indifferent over my quiet suburban street. I'd risen at 6, made coffee in the same blue mug I'd used for 3 decades, and spent 20 minutes reading the newspaper at my kitchen table. Normal. Predictable. At 7:45 a.m. I grabbed my keys and headed to my car for my weekly grocery run. The engine turned over smoothly. My late husband Robert had always insisted on regular maintenance, and I'd kept that habit alive even after his death. As I backed down the driveway I heard it. A faint scraping sound, metal against concrete. Barely noticeable. The kind of sound you'd normally ignore. But something made me stop. I shifted into park and sat there for a moment, engine idling, telling myself it was nothing. Gravel. A loose heat shield. Old cars make noises. That's what people tell themselves when they don't want to investigate. When they want to believe everything is fine. I shut off the engine anyway. The morning air was cold when I stepped out. My knees protested as I knelt on the concrete driveway, and I remember thinking how ridiculous I must look. A woman my age in her good coat, crouched beside her car like a mechanic. I leaned forward and peered under the rear frame. That's when I saw it. Black. Clean. A rectangular device no bigger than a deck of cards, attached with industrial-grade magnets to the undercarriage. It had a small LED light blinking green in steady intervals. Too carefully placed to be accidental. Too new to be part of the car's original equipment. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. What I felt was something colder and more dangerous. Recognition. I'd seen devices like this before, 20 years ago when I worked in operations and logistics for a defense contractor. Not often and never this close, but enough to know what I was looking at. GPS tracker. Someone wanted to know where I went, where I shopped, when I left home, when I returned. Someone was watching me, and they'd been doing it quietly, carefully, without my knowledge or consent. Are you still watching? Drop a like if this story is giving you chills. And subscribe if you haven't already. We bring you stories like this every single day. I didn't cry out. I didn't rush inside to call the police. Instead, I reached up slowly and removed it. The magnets released with a soft click, and the device rested in my palm, still warm from the engine heat. Standing there in my driveway, holding something that didn't belong to me, I felt an unsettling question settle in my chest like a stone. How long had this been there? Days, weeks, months? And more importantly, who put it there? I walked back inside, locked the door behind me, and sat at my kitchen table with the tracker in front of me. The green light continued its steady pulse. Still active. Still transmitting. Somewhere, someone was looking at a screen right now, seeing my home address, knowing I'd stopped moving. I thought about calling the police. I should have called the police. But something held me back. If I reported this, there would be questions. Investigations. And whoever had placed this device would know immediately that I'd found it. They'd disappear, cover their tracks, and I'd never get answers. I needed to be smarter than that. I made a decision that would change everything. I grabbed my coat, dropped the tracker into my pocket, and drove to a truck stop on the edge of town. The place was busy with long-haul drivers fueling up, checking their rigs, preparing for interstate runs. I parked and walked casually through the lot, scanning the trucks until I found what I was looking for. An 18-wheeler with Canadian destination paperwork taped inside the windshield. Manitoba. I waited until no one was watching, then crouched beside the trailer and attached the tracker to the cold steel undercarriage. The magnets held firm. I stood up, brushed off my hands and walked back to my car. If someone was tracking me, they were about to take a very long trip north. I drove home and tried to return to my normal routine. I cleaned the kitchen. I sorted through mail. I watered my plants. But my mind kept circling back to the same question. Who would do this to me? I was a 64-year-old widow living alone in a quiet neighborhood. I had no enemies, no dramatic conflicts, no reason to be anyone's target. Unless it wasn't about me at all. Unless it was about what I had. The thought arrived cold and clear. My late husband Robert had been careful with money. When he died, he left me the house paid off along with a substantial life insurance policy and retirement savings. I wasn't wealthy by any measure, but I was comfortable, secure, and perhaps to the wrong person that made me vulnerable. That evening I forced myself to keep everything the same. I made dinner. I watched the news. I went to bed at my usual time. If someone was monitoring my movements through that tracker, I wanted them to see nothing unusual. Just an elderly woman going through her predictable, boring routine. But I barely slept. Every small sound made me alert. The house settling. The wind against the windows. The distant sound of a car passing on the street. I lay in the dark, wondering if someone was out there right now, parked somewhere nearby, watching my house, waiting. Comment below if you've ever felt like someone was watching you. And don't forget to turn on that notification bell. We post new stories at the same time every day. The next morning I checked my security system. Something Robert had insisted on installing years ago. The motion sensors showed nothing unusual. No one had approached the house during the night. But that didn't comfort me. Whoever had planted that tracker had done it carefully, professionally. They knew how to move without being seen. I decided to review my finances. I logged into my bank account and began scrolling through recent transactions, looking for anything unusual. First, everything seemed normal. Grocery store charges, utility bills, the occasional dinner out. But then I slowed down and looked closer. There were small withdrawals I didn't remember making. $200 here. $150 there. Amounts small enough to slip past casual attention, but frequent enough to add up. Over the past 4 months, nearly $3,000 had been withdrawn from my account in increments designed not to trigger fraud alerts. My hands went cold. Someone had access to my account. Someone who knew exactly how to steal without being noticed. I grabbed a notepad and started writing down dates, amounts, patterns. 3 of the withdrawals had occurred on days when I'd been visiting my daughter Caroline. 2 more happened when I was at my book club meetings. Whoever was doing this knew my schedule. They knew when I'd be away from home. That's when my phone rang. I stared at the caller ID. It was Caroline, my only child, my 32-year-old daughter who taught 3rd grade and still called me 3 times a week just to chat. I answered, forcing my voice to sound normal. Mom. Hey, I was just thinking about you. Are you free for lunch today? Of course, sweetheart. Where do you want to meet? Actually, I was hoping to come by your place. Jason and I want to talk to you about something. Jason Pierce. Caroline's fiancé of 8 months. They'd met at a charity fundraiser where Caroline had volunteered, and she'd been smitten immediately. Jason was 36, handsome in a catalog model way, with perfectly styled dark hair and a smile that seemed practiced. He worked in financial consulting, he'd told me, helping people manage their investments and plan for retirement. I'd met him 4 times. Each time he'd been charming, attentive, asking questions about my life, my history, my late husband's career. At the time, I'd thought he was simply trying to get to know his future mother-in-law. Now, with that tracker fresh in my mind and those unexplained withdrawals staring at me from my bank statement, his interest felt different. Calculated. That sounds wonderful, I said. What time? Around noon. I'll bring sandwiches. Perfect. See you then. After we hung up, I sat very still. Jason had been to my house 6 times over the past 8 months. He'd used my bathroom. He'd borrowed my phone once when his battery died. He'd helped me carry in groceries. He'd had access, opportunity. And if he worked in financial consulting, He'd have the knowledge to manipulate accounts. But would he really do that to his fiancée's mother? Would Caroline's own fiancé track me, steal from me, and smile to my face while doing it? I wanted to be wrong. God, how I wanted to be wrong. If you're hooked on this story, show us some love with a like. And subscribe if you want more jaw-dropping true stories delivered to your feed every single day. I spent the next 2 hours preparing for their visit. Not by cooking or cleaning but by setting up a small test. I placed my purse in the living room, deliberately positioned where someone would pass it on the way to the bathroom. Inside, I tucked a $20 bill between my credit cards, not visible unless someone opened the wallet and looked inside. Then I waited. Caroline arrived at exactly noon, carrying a paper bag from the deli down the street. She hugged me tightly, smelling of vanilla perfume and coffee. Jason followed close behind, dressed in casual expensive clothes, designer jeans, a tailored shirt, leather jacket. He kissed my cheek and handed me a small bouquet of flowers. "Margaret, you look wonderful," he said, his voice warm. "Caroline tells me you've been walking every morning. That's great for your health." "I try to stay active," I replied, watching his eyes. They were blue and direct, giving nothing away. We sat at the kitchen table and ate lunch. Caroline talked about her students, about a little boy who'd finally learned to read and a girl who'd won the science fair. Jason listened attentively, adding comments at the right moments, but I noticed how his gaze occasionally drifted around the room, taking inventory, calculating. Halfway through the meal, he excused himself to use the bathroom. I noted the time, 12:34 p.m. He returned 8 minutes later. 8 minutes is too long for a bathroom visit. It's enough time to search a room, to open drawers, to check a purse. "Sorry about that," Jason said with an easy smile. "Your bathroom sink was dripping, so I tightened the faucet. Hope you don't mind." "Not at all. Thank you." After they left, I checked my purse. The $20 bill was gone. I sat down heavily in my chair, feeling something break inside me. Not my heart, that had been broken when Robert died. This was different. This was the shattering of trust, the realization that someone I'd welcomed into my home, someone my daughter loved, was stealing from me right under my nose. I called my bank immediately and requested a fraud investigation. The representative was helpful but cautious. She explained that without clear evidence of unauthorized access, there was little they could do. The withdrawals had been made using my ATM card and PIN. No forced entry. No obvious theft. "Is it possible someone close to you has access to your card?" she asked gently. "Yes," I said quietly. "It's possible." I hung up and stared at the wall. I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. And I knew exactly where to get it. Comment your thoughts so far. Do you think Jason is the one behind this? Let us know below. And hit subscribe. We've got more incredible stories coming your way. I spent the next hour searching through my home office, pulling out old files from my career in defense logistics. Finally, I found what I was looking for. The business card of a private investigator I'd worked with years ago on a corporate security matter. Vincent Hayes. I'd always liked Vincent. He was thorough, discreet, and he understood that the worst betrayals often came from the people you trusted most. Called the number. A gravelly voice answered on the third ring. "Hayes Investigations. Vincent. This is Margaret Davies. We worked together about 15 years ago on the Meridian case." There was a pause, then recognition. "Margaret. My God, how are you? I heard about Robert. I'm so sorry." "Thank you. Vincent, I need your help. Something's happened, and I don't know who else to trust. Tell me everything." I explained about the tracker, the stolen money, Jason Pierce. Vincent listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Margaret, I'm going to be straight with you. What you're describing sounds like a romance scam, but more sophisticated. If this Jason character is targeting you through your daughter, he's playing a long game. Patient, careful. Those are the most dangerous ones. Can you investigate him?" "Absolutely. But I need to warn you, If he's as careful as you say, confronting him without solid proof could be dangerous. He could disappear, or worse, he could manipulate Caroline against you. I understand. How long will it take? Give me 3 days. I'll run a full background check, financials, criminal history, aliases. If there's dirt on this guy, I'll find it. Thank you, Vincent. Margaret, be careful. Don't let him know you're suspicious. Normal. If he realizes you're on to him, he'll vanish and you'll never get justice. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room and made a decision. I would be careful. I would be patient. But I would not be a victim. The next morning, I woke to find my car wouldn't start. The battery was dead. I called roadside assistance, and while I waited for the technician, I noticed something odd. The hood wasn't fully latched. I always checked the hood after closing it, another habit from Robert, who'd been paranoid about proper maintenance. Someone had opened my hood during the night. The technician arrived and tested the battery. Ma'am, someone disconnected your battery cable. See here. It's been loosened just enough to break the connection, but not enough to look obvious. This wasn't an accident. My blood went cold. Can you fix it? Sure, just takes a second. He reconnected the cable and the car started immediately. But ma'am, if someone's tampering with your vehicle, you might want to call the police. Thank you. I will. But I didn't call the police. Because now I understood something crucial. Jason wasn't just stealing money. He was isolating me, making me dependent. The tracker had been step 1, learning my routine, knowing when I was vulnerable. The financial theft was step 2, slowly draining my resources. And now this, sabotaging my car, limiting my mobility. This wasn't opportunistic theft. This was a carefully orchestrated plan. Is your heart racing yet? Like this video if you're on the edge of your seat. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. We post every day at the same time. That afternoon, Caroline called again. She sounded excited, almost breathless. Mom, I have amazing news. Jason proposed that we move up the wedding date. He thinks we should get married next month instead of waiting until spring. Isn't that romantic? My heart sank. That's very sudden, sweetheart. Why the rush? He says when you know, you know. And Mom, I've been thinking. Jason suggested we could move in with you for a few months after the wedding, just until we find our own place. You have all that extra space, and it would give us time to save money. What do you think? There it was. The real plan. Move into my house. Get complete access to my accounts, my belongings, my life. And once he had legal ties to the family through marriage, it would be even harder to expose him without destroying Caroline's life. Let me think about it, I said carefully. That's a big decision. Of course. No pressure. We can talk about it more this weekend. Jason wants to take us both out to dinner. Somewhere nice. His treat. After we hung up, I called Vincent Hayes. I need those results faster. He's accelerating his timeline. I'm working as fast as I can, Margaret. But I found something interesting. Jason Pierce has 3 previous addresses in the last 5 years. Denver, Phoenix, and Seattle. In each city, he was engaged to a woman with a widowed or elderly mother. In each case, the engagement ended suddenly, and in 2 cases, the mothers filed police reports for financial elder abuse. My hands started shaking. Did he go to jail? No. In both cases, the charges were dropped. The families didn't want to pursue it. My guess is he convinced the daughters that their mothers were confused, maybe even experiencing dementia. By the time the truth came out, he'd already moved on to the next city, the next target. How much did he take? In Denver, about $75,000 over 6 months. In Phoenix, closer to $100,000. He's not a small-time thief, Margaret. He's a professional predator who specializes in exploiting family dynamics. Closed my eyes. He's planning to marry Caroline next month. He wants to move into my house. Then we need to move faster. I'm going to contact the victims in Denver and Phoenix, See if they'll talk. Their testimony could be crucial. In the meantime, do not, I repeat, do not let him into your house alone. And don't sign anything he asks you to sign. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Caroline, about how happy she'd been when she introduced me to Jason, about the way her face lit up when she talked about their future together. She thought she'd found her forever. She thought she was building a life. She had no idea she was dating a con artist who saw her as nothing more than a pathway to my bank account. Comment below if you think Margaret should tell Caroline everything right now. And don't forget to like and subscribe. We're building an amazing community of true crime fans here. The next day, Thursday, my phone rang at 11 a.m. The number was unfamiliar, with a Canadian area code. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Davies. This is Officer Michael Santos with the Canadian Border Services Agency. I'm calling about a matter that may concern you. My mouth went dry. Yes. We detained a man yesterday at a rest stop near the Manitoba border. He was following a GPS signal that led us to a commercial truck passing through. When we searched his vehicle, we found surveillance equipment, including photographs. Photographs of what? Of you, Mrs. Davies. Close-up images of you leaving your home, getting into your car, shopping at various locations. There were also detailed notes about your daily routine, including times and locations. The man claims he was hired to conduct surveillance, but he refuses to identify his employer. The room tilted. Did you find a GPS tracker? Yes, attached to the truck. The man admitted he'd been following its signal for the past 2 days, apparently confused about why the target had suddenly traveled to Canada. Mrs. Davies, do you have any idea who might have placed that tracker on your vehicle? I found it under my car. I removed it and attached it to that truck. There was a pause. That was remarkably clever. The man we detained has been calling one contact repeatedly since his arrest. The contact is saved in his phone under a single name. Jason. Everything went silent. The world narrowed to that single word. Jason. Officer Santos, I need to know everything you found. I believe I know who hired him, and that person is planning to marry my daughter next month. We'll need you to file a formal statement. But Mrs. Davies, I should warn you, the man we detained is a professional. He's been arrested twice before for stalking and illegal surveillance. Whoever hired him paid well and understood exactly what they were buying. Your daughter could be in danger. This is insane. If you're loving this twist, smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. You won't want to miss how this ends. After the call ended, I sat motionless at my kitchen table. The pieces were all there now, arranged in a pattern I could no longer deny. Jason Pierce was not who he claimed to be. He'd hired someone to track me, to learn my patterns, to gather information. He'd stolen my money. He'd sabotaged my car. And now he was rushing to marry Caroline, to get legal access to everything I owned. But why hire someone to track me all the way to Canada? What was he looking for? Then it hit me. He wasn't just tracking me. He was making sure I stayed in my routine. The surveillance wasn't about gathering information. It was about making sure I didn't leave town, didn't suddenly disappear or do something unpredictable that would disrupt his plans. He needed me stable, accessible, and unaware until he'd secured his position in the family. The tracker going to Canada must have panicked him. He would have seen me suddenly traveling hundreds of miles from home, completely off pattern. He probably thought I'd discovered something, that I was running, that his entire con was about to collapse, which meant he'd be desperate now. Dangerous. My phone buzzed. A text from Caroline. Dinner tonight? Jason made reservations at Marcello's for 7. Can't wait to see you. Love. I stared at the message. Every instinct told me to refuse, to call Caroline immediately and tell her everything. But Vincent's warning echoed in my mind. If he realizes you're onto him, he'll vanish and you'll never get justice. Or worse, he might do something desperate. I texted back. Sounds lovely. See you at 7. Then I called Vincent Hayes. I need you to meet me at Marcelo's restaurant tonight at 7 p.m. Don't come inside. Just wait in the parking lot. If I text you the word, emergency, call 911 immediately. Margaret, what are you planning? I'm going to end this. Tonight. I spent the afternoon preparing. I printed out my bank statements with the suspicious withdrawals circled in red. I wrote down the dates and times Jason had been alone in my house. I documented everything. The tracker, the disconnected battery cable, the missing $20. Then I called Officer Santos in Canada and asked him to email me the surveillance photos they'd confiscated. When the email arrived, I felt sick. There were dozens of photos. Me walking to my car. Me at the grocery store. Me checking my mailbox. Me in my own driveway, keys in hand, completely unaware I was being watched. Some were taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. Others were close enough to see the expression on my face. I'd been hunted like prey. Comment if this story is making you check your own car for trackers. And subscribe. We're dropping another mind-blowing story tomorrow. I printed the most damning photos and added them to my evidence folder. Then I dressed carefully. Not fancy but dignified. Confident. I wanted Jason to see that I was still the harmless elderly woman he thought I was, right up until the moment I wasn't. I arrived at Marcelo's at exactly 7 p.m. Caroline was already there, sitting at a corner table, looking radiant in a blue dress. Jason sat beside her, arm draped casually across the back of her chair. He stood when he saw me, that practiced smile already in place. Margaret, you look wonderful. He pulled out my chair with a flourish. Thank you, Jason. I sat down and placed my purse carefully beside me. Inside was the folder of evidence. We ordered drinks and appetizers. The conversation was light, pleasant. Caroline talked about wedding plans. Flowers, music, guest lists. Jason listened attentively, occasionally touching her hand, playing the role of devoted fiancé perfectly. Mom, Jason had the best idea, Caroline said, her eyes shining. He thinks we should have the wedding at your house. In the garden, with lights strung up in the trees. Doesn't that sound magical? Very magical, I agreed, watching Jason. Though I imagine that would require a lot of preparation. You'd need access to the house for weeks beforehand. Exactly. Jason leaned forward eagerly. We'd need to do measurements, plan the layout, maybe even do some renovations to make sure everything's perfect. Caroline and I were thinking we could start staying over on weekends, really make it feel like a family project. There it was. The push for access, wrapped in romance and family togetherness. That does sound lovely, I said. Though I have to ask, Jason, how would you afford all these renovations? I know financial consulting can be unpredictable. Something flickered in his eyes. I do well enough. And for Caroline, anything is worth it. Of course. You've been so generous. Always paying for dinners, bringing flowers. You even tightened my bathroom faucet last week. I paused deliberately. Though I don't remember the sink dripping. Jason's smile didn't waver, but his posture changed slightly. Tighter. More alert. Caroline laughed. Mom, you probably just didn't notice. You know how you can be sometimes. How I can be. I repeated softly. You know, a little forgetful. It's normal at your age. The words hit like a slap. My own daughter, already primed to dismiss my concerns as age-related confusion. Jason had done his work well. Caroline, I said gently, I'm not forgetful. I'm actually quite sharp. For instance, I remember very clearly that last Tuesday, I had exactly $60 in my wallet. After Jason visited, I had $40. Caroline frowned. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying that $20 went missing. Just like $3,000 has gone missing from my bank account over the past 4 months. Jason's face went carefully neutral. Margaret, that's a serious accusation. If you're having trouble keeping track of your finances, maybe we should sit down and... I'm not having trouble. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder. I placed the bank statements on the table between us. These are unauthorized withdrawals. Small amounts, carefully timed to avoid detection. They all occurred on days when you knew I'd be away from home. Caroline's face had gone pale. Mom, stop. You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? I laid out the next document, the report from the Canadian Border Services. Then perhaps you can explain why a man was arrested in Manitoba 2 days ago with photographs of me. Professional surveillance photos, taken over a period of weeks. The man admitted he was hired. And the only contact in his phone was saved under one name. Jason. Are you kidding me right now? Like this video if your jaw just dropped. And subscribe. This story isn't over yet. The restaurant seemed to go quiet around us. Caroline was staring at the photos, her hands shaking. Jason sat very still. His expression unreadable. This is insane, he said finally, his voice tight. Margaret, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but... No games. I laid out the final piece of evidence. Printouts of the police reports from Denver and Phoenix. Is your real name Jason Pierce? Or is it Jason Crawford? Or maybe Jason Mendez? Because you've used all 3 names in the past 5 years, in 3 different cities, always engaged to women with access to family money. In Denver, you stole $75,000 from Helen Forrester's mother. In Phoenix, you took $100,000 from the Delgado family. And now you're here, trying to do the same thing to us. Caroline made a sound like she'd been punched. She turned to Jason, tears streaming down her face. Tell her this isn't true. Tell her she's wrong. Jason didn't look at her. He was looking at me, and for the first time the mask had completely fallen away. What remained was cold and calculating, a predator caught mid-hunt. You stupid old woman, he said quietly. You have no idea what you've done. Jason, Caroline's voice broke. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. This was supposed to be easy. You were supposed to be easy. A lonely widow, desperate for family. Too trusting to ask questions. But you had to be clever, didn't you? You had to interfere. You hired someone to track me, I said, my voice steady. You stole from me. You manipulated my daughter. What did you think would happen? I thought you'd do what everyone else did. Doubt yourself. Second guess. Let me convince you that you were confused, that your memory was failing. But you couldn't do that, could you? You had to investigate. You had to ruin everything. Caroline was sobbing now, her hands covering her face. Other diners had started to notice the commotion, conversations dying as heads turned toward our table. Jason looked around, seemed to calculate his options, then grabbed his jacket. This is done. We're done. Caroline, if you're smart, you'll realize your mother is a paranoid old woman who just destroyed your happiness. But something tells me you're not that smart. He walked toward the exit. I pulled out my phone and texted Vincent. Emergency. But Jason never made it to the door. 2 police officers entered the restaurant, moving with purpose. They intercepted Jason near the hostess stand, and I watched as one of them spoke to him quietly. Jason's face went from angry to shocked to terrified in the space of 3 seconds. But wait, there's more. Keep watching because you won't believe what they found. And smash that like button if this story has you hooked. The officers escorted Jason out in handcuffs. But as they walked him past our table, he suddenly lunged toward me, breaking free from one officer's grip. His face twisted with rage. You think you've won, he snarled. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have people who'll make sure you. The second officer tackled him to the ground before he could finish. As they restrained him, something fell from his jacket pocket, a small prescription bottle. The officer picked it up, read the label, and his expression changed. Mrs. Davies, did you ever feel unusually tired or foggy when this man was around? My blood ran cold. Sometimes, after he'd been at my house, I'd feel exhausted for days. I thought it was just stress. The officer held up the bottle. This is Rohypnol, a date rape drug. We'll need to test your home for contamination, but it looks like he may have been drugging you to make you more compliant, more confused. It would explain why you'd question your own memory." Caroline let out a strangled cry. The horror of what could have happened, what had been happening, settled over us like a shroud. But there was more. As the officers searched Jason, they found a key. Not just any key, my house key. He'd made a copy. "Mrs. Davies," the officer said grimly, "you need to change your locks tonight. He's had unrestricted access to your home." Vincent Hayes appeared then, having rushed in when he saw the police cars. He took one look at the scene and immediately understood. While the police finished processing Jason, Vincent pulled me aside. "Margaret, there's something else you need to know. I just got a call from my contact in Seattle. There was a fourth victim we didn't know about. An 80-year-old woman named Dorothy Chen. She died 6 months ago, supposedly a fall down her stairs. But her daughter just came forward. She found evidence that Jason had been living in her mother's house, had forged documents to transfer Dorothy's property to himself. The daughter believes he pushed her mother down those stairs when she discovered what he was doing." The room spun. This wasn't just theft. This was attempted murder. And I could have been next. Oh my God. If this story is blowing your mind, you need to like and subscribe. Comment "Justice served" if you're glad Margaret caught him. We post stories like this every single day. Caroline was crying so hard she could barely breathe. I moved to her side of the table and wrapped my arms around her, holding her while she shook. Other diners politely looked away, giving us the illusion of privacy in a very public breakdown. "I'm so sorry," I whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry." "You were right," she gasped between sobs. "Oh God, Mom, you were right. I didn't believe you. I thought you were just being paranoid." I told him you've been acting strange lately, and he said maybe we should keep an eye on you, make sure you were okay. He was using me. He was using me to get to you. And that woman in Seattle. What if he was planning to do that to you? He was very good at what he did. This wasn't your fault. I was going to marry him. I was going to bring him into your home. What if you hadn't figured it out? What if? But I did figure it out. And now it's over. We sat there for a long time, holding each other while the restaurant slowly returned to normal around us. Vincent Hayes appeared eventually, quiet and respectful, waiting until Caroline had calmed down before approaching our table. "Margaret." "Caroline. I think we should get you both home." Caroline rode with me, silent and exhausted. When we reached my house, she didn't want to go back to her apartment. She curled up on my couch like she used to when she was small, and I covered her with an Afghan my mother had knitted decades ago. I sat in the chair across from her and watched her sleep, thinking about trust and betrayal and how sometimes the people we love make us the most vulnerable. The next morning, Officer Santos called with an update. The man they detained in Canada, a career criminal named Keith Harper, had agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. He'd given them everything. Phone records, payment receipts, recorded conversations with Jason. Real name, Jason Brennan. He had warrants in 4 states. He'd been running variations of this con for almost a decade, always targeting families with older widows, always using romance with a younger family member as his access point. The estimated total of his thefts over the years was close to $800,000. And there was more evidence connecting him to Dorothy Chen's death. Security footage from her building showed Jason entering her apartment the day she died. The Seattle police were reopening the investigation as a homicide. "You stopped him," Officer Santos said. "If you hadn't found that tracker, if you hadn't been smart enough to investigate, he would have taken everything from you and moved on to the next victim. Or worse, you saved yourself, Mrs. Davies. And you may have prevented another murder." Comment "Margaret is a hero" if you agree. This woman literally saved lives. Like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss our daily uploads. But it didn't feel like victory. Felt like loss. Caroline stayed with me for 3 days. Talk. We cried. We pieced together all the small moments that should have been warning signs but weren't, because we'd wanted to believe in happiness. Because love makes us hopeful and hope makes us blind. On the fourth day, Caroline went back to her apartment. She was different now. Quieter, more careful, less quick to trust. I hated that. I hated what Jason had taken from her that had nothing to do with money. 2 weeks later, I received a call from Helen Forrester in Denver, one of Jason's previous victims. Vincent had connected us. We talked for over an hour. She told me how Jason had isolated her daughter from her, how he'd convinced the family that Helen was losing her memory, how he'd nearly succeeded in having her declared incompetent so he could access her accounts directly. "You're braver than I was," Helen said. "I let him intimidate me. I dropped the charges because I was afraid of what it would do to my relationship with my daughter. And he just moved on to hurt someone else. I'll have to live with that. With knowing that Dorothy Chen might still be alive if I'd pressed charges." "You were trying to protect your family," I said. "That's not weakness." "Maybe. But Margaret, what you did, confronting him publicly, gathering evidence, refusing to be gaslit into silence, that takes real courage. You didn't just save yourself. You broke the pattern. You got justice for Dorothy. You saved future victims we'll never even know about." After we hung up, I walked through my house, touching familiar surfaces, reclaiming spaces that had felt violated. The kitchen where Jason had smiled and stolen. The bathroom where he'd searched my things and likely drugged my drinks. The driveway where someone had attached a tracker to my car. I thought about fear and how it had slipped into my life quietly, hoping I wouldn't notice until it was too late. But I had noticed. I'd been careful, methodical, patient. I trusted my instincts when everyone else told me I was confused. It hadn't made me careless. It had made me wise. That night I made dinner for myself and Caroline. Her favorite, the same recipe I'd made every birthday since she was 6. She arrived looking tired but more like herself, carrying a bottle of wine and a small smile. We ate. We talked about safe things, her students, my garden, the weather. Slowly, carefully, we were rebuilding what Jason had damaged. After dinner, Caroline helped me wash dishes, and as we stood side by side at the sink, she said quietly, "Mom, thank you for not giving up on me. Even when I didn't believe you. I could never give up on you. You're my daughter." "I know. But I made it so hard. I was so defensive, so convinced you were wrong. And all along you were trying to protect me. You literally saved my life. The police said if you hadn't stopped him, I could have been next after you." "That's what mothers do," I said simply. She hugged me then, tight and long, and I felt something shift between us. Not back to what we were before. That innocence was gone. But forward toward something stronger. Something built on truth instead of assumptions. If this story touched your heart, show some love with a like. And subscribe if you believe in the power of a mother's love and intuition. Later, after Caroline left, I stood in my driveway under the night sky. I thought about the tracker that had started everything, that small black device that had seemed so frightening when I first found it. In the end, it had been Jason's biggest mistake. He'd underestimated me. He'd seen an elderly widow and assumed vulnerability. Assumed I wouldn't investigate, wouldn't fight back. He'd forgotten that survival isn't about age or strength. It's about awareness, patience, and the refusal to be a victim. 3 months later, I attended Jason's trial. He was charged with multiple counts of fraud, theft, stalking, drugging, and second-degree murder in Dorothy Chen's death. Caroline came with me, holding my hand as we listened to testimony from his other victims. 7 women total. 7 families destroyed. 1 woman dead. When the guilty verdict came in, Caroline squeezed my hand. Jason was sentenced to 35 years in prison. He'd be 71 when he got out, if he lived that long. As we left the courthouse, a young woman approached me. She was about Caroline's age, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. "Mrs. Davies. I'm Rachel Chen. Dorothy was my mother." My heart clenched. "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you. I just wanted to tell you. If you hadn't caught him, I would have spent the rest of my life thinking my mother just fell. Thinking I should have been there, should have helped her more. But you gave me the truth. You gave me justice. And you stopped him from doing this to anyone else. We hugged, two women bound by grief and survival, by the knowledge that evil had touched our families but hadn't won. That night, I locked my door and slept soundly. When morning came, I made coffee in my blue mug, read the newspaper at my kitchen table, and began the ordinary work of reclaiming my life. Because fear had come quietly, but I had met it with something louder. The determination to survive, the courage to investigate, and the love of a mother who refused to let evil disguise itself as family. And in the end, that was enough. If this story gave you chills, taught you something, or made you want to hug your mom, please hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel for daily true crime stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Comment your location below and let us know what you thought of Margaret's story. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we upload. We post every single day at the same time. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Stay safe out there and remember, trust your instincts. They might just save your life. See you tomorrow with another incredible story.